Thank you for tuning into the Faceless Podcast. I go by the name of Shepherd. My friends call me Sheps. Call me what you want, as long as it's not Oi. I'll most probably respond. This is a bit of a special video for no other reason apart from the fact that it's my birthday today. So again, want to thank God adding another year into my life. Appreciate that. Thank you. Now let's get to today's topic. And I think again, this is another highly important one. And some of these, especially based on the last one, based on this one as well, people might look at it and think, oh, these are just throwaway topics. But I think these are actually some of the most important topics we could discuss, because it will help you when you're now dialoguing with your friends and family in an attempt to educate each other, in an attempt to be consistent, in an attempt to just kind of better understand these topics. So what I want to talk about today, and again, this will probably be a brief video, is defining terms. Defining terms. Now let that sink in for a little bit. Now, why do I say this is important? So, okay, first of all, let me go on. What do I mean by defining terms? So, what I tend to see a lot, especially, and again, this is pulling from my experience, this is from pulling from the debates I've watched, from dialogues I've watched, conversations I've watched, is defining terms. It needs to be established early doors. Number one, it will save you time. Number two, it will set a positive path for the dialogue. Number three, it will help you understand where each other stands, for lack of a better term. So why do I say what is defining terms? So let's say we're talking about a topic, for example. I'll give you an arbitrary topic. Let's talk about football. Now, as you know, some people call football soccer, some people call it football. To the American people out there, they're thinking, when I've called, before I even said soccer, when I said football, to them they've already got a different image in their head. So why it's important to define terms is when we're discussing, if we say let's discuss football, let's talk about football. We define, okay, by football we're talking about soccer. We're talking about the actual real football, where there's your foot and a ball. That's what we're talking about, not the hand egg or American football where they barely use their feet, and it's not really a ball. But we'll leave that. That's not important. But you already see how important it is to be defining terms. So so the reason I think it's important is words have definitions. Words have meanings for a reason. You don't need to have an A star in English literature, in English, whatever the other one is called, to understand that words have got meanings for a reason. The reason you can understand what I'm saying to you now is because the words that I'm using have got established meanings which allow you to make sense of what I'm saying. Because if I had my own meanings and my own terms for every single word that I'm using, there'll be no point in me making this video. Because right now I could be talking about unicorns, because in my head I've got my own definitions. So words have meaning for a reason. So this is why when you're now discussing, especially some of these topics that are highly sensitive, some of the topics that you might be touching on that that require a certain level of depth when it comes to thinking, a certain level of intellect. Defining terms is one of the best things you can do to ensure you meet those three things that I said at the start. So saving time, helping each other understand, and then setting a good path for the dialogue. Apologies if you can hear a bit of sound. I don't know who's deciding to build houses while I'm recording. They're not really respecting the Faceless podcast. They're not respecting you guys, but we'll have a word later on. But yeah, so back to the topic. So again, I've touched on why it's important. What I see a lot is people talking past each other. A good example of this is maybe if you look at some of the debates where it's someone on the extreme left or maybe someone on the extreme right. If you look, even if you look at certain terms, and I'll go into them a little bit later on, people talk past each other because they're not talking about the same things. So to put it bluntly, they're not talking about the same topics. When you're discussing football, if I'm talking about soccer and you're talking about American football, we're already on different. We're already talking about different things. So we won't be able to have a middle ground. We won't be able to have that a point at which we can find common ground, because we're already on two different paths. And what this does is it leads to a breakdown in dialogue. It leads to you may be even walking away from someone or from a point of view that you might even significantly agree with, but because you failed to define those terms from the outset, it's not a positive thing for that dialogue. And as you know, here at the Faceless Podcast, your mind matters. So what we're trying to do is encourage diversity of thought, not just diversity of skin tone. So that's what we're trying to encourage. So this defining terms is highly important when it comes to establishing and having those good discussions. So another thing to bear in mind when you are defining terms is language evolves. So definitions and words evolve, which is another reason why defining them is important. So make sure that when you're discussing, when you're speaking to someone, you bear this in mind as well. So you could say, let's take the word gay, for example. I don't know how many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, maybe slightly longer, it was a term that meant happy, joyful, happy. Now it's a term that refers to a homosexual male, and I don't know if it used to refer to homosexual male and female, but now I think it's more closely aligned with homosexual males. So now if you're using that term, the term has evolved. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So when you're discussing, having these dialogues, as I hope you'll be doing on the back of these conversations, as I hope you'll be doing with your peers, with your colleagues, with your family members, in order to encourage this diversity of thought, you have to bear that in mind as well. Another thing that I think you should do now we're on to my recommendations of how to kind of make sure that you're on the same page with someone. Agree on the sources that you could go to for definitions. So that's another important thing, because again, because words evolve, because terms evolve over time, I could be looking at a dictionary from the 1800s, and obviously that definition is from the 1800s. Or someone could be looking on Wikipedia and that definition is from yesterday. So you need to agree on the sources in which you could go to say, you know what, if we're having a discussion, and I know the thing is, I know how this sounds. It sounds like, yeah, you're setting up a formal debate, but this is something that can easily be done even if you're just discussing things at the dinner table. So if there's a discrepancy between definitions, let both of you or the whole group of you agree at a source that you could go to and say, you know what, we think this source is credible and will give us the most accurate definition of the word as it's seen today. And what this will allow you to do, why this is important, is it will allow you to then shift your argument to cater to that change in definition. And this is again something that can be done very easily. So what I tend to do is if I've got a disagreement with regards to definitions, I might go on Google, I might go Oxford Dictionary, I might go on wherever. And if you and people are smart, again, this is just a footnote to put in there. People will be smart. So if you're dealing with someone, this is why I feel like it's important as well for me to be getting this information out there. If you're dealing with someone that's well versed in understanding the importance of defining terms, what they'll do straight away, and I've caught myself doing this as well, straight away when you disagree on a term, you know what, let me look for the definition. And immediately, what I'll do quickly, look, okay, cool, that definition, it doesn't really strengthen my argument. This one does. Okay, cool. Mr. So-and-so, look at what it says here. So do not be fooled by that. Feel free yourself as well to go look at the definition, and then again, and what will happen is maybe the conversation might shift slightly, but you can always bring it back. Which is why my point earlier when I said agree on sources that you could go to for definitions is highly important to kind of protect yourself against sneaky little people that like myself that will realize, okay, I could gain the upper hand in this discussion by going to the definition first and hoping that you don't notice. So and again, one of the reasons I'm putting this out there as well is to just kind of further educate each other when it comes to having these good dialogues. So if you're ever having a discussion with me and you see, oh, wait, Shepard's just gone, he's just rushed for a definition, do the same thing. do the same thing, pull up your dictionary and say, look, okay, and then now what you forced me to do is meet you in the middle. So instead of me just going by the definition that strengthens my point, you've now forced me to meet you in the middle and to look for maybe a definition that will cater to both of us for the benefit of the discussion. So that's another thing that I think is highly important. So one thing that I highly discourage when you are defining terms, try to stick away from subjective definitions. Try to be objective in your definitions. Try to stick away. When someone tells you, well, this is what it means to me, what they're trying to do is, I don't know if you could call it straw manning exactly, but it's shift. So let's look at this. Let's look at defining terms as a tug of war. Let's look at it as a tug of war. When everything's balanced, that little red line's in the middle. I don't know if this is the middle, but that little red line's in the middle. What I do, or what I will be doing, because I don't necessarily take this approach, but what I will be doing by saying what this word means to me, I'm slightly realigning what that little red line is. And if you don't know what tug of war is, then we've got questions about your childhood, because that used to be a fun game. But yeah, just to give that example, so when everything's in equilibrium, it gives both sides the best chance to kind of win that debate, win the argument. But then as soon as I shift that slightly, the odds are stacked that little bit more against you. So when I go, if I say what this word means to me, what I'm doing by doing that is shifting that power balance slightly in my direction, because now you're not arguing on the definition of the or you're not arguing your points based on the definition of the subject matter, or of the topic, or of the kind of words that you're using are within that subject matter. You're not arguing it based on my view. You're arguing it based on my interpretation of what those words mean. So you're already on the back foot. So what I'd suggest, stick away, try to stay away. I highly discourage it from subjective definitions. Try to be objective, try to go to sources, because again, like I mentioned earlier, words have got meanings for a reason. Let's use the meanings that are there. It's the best way to find consistency. It's the best way to find that common ground. And some examples now of these terms that are often used this way. Racism, for example. If I ask you, I'm going to ask you in the comments below, put your definition of racism. And I'm sure we'll get, I was going to say a million, but I'm not getting a million comments yet. But we'll get 15, 20 different definitions of racism if it's subjective. But if we say, look, let's look for the objective definition of racism, to the definition that I prescribe to is racism is discrimination solely based on someone's race. That, to me, that's the definition I still prescribe to. I feel like that's the most consistent definition in terms of when we come to discussing these points. Now, what I've heard people say, in order for it to be racist, there needs to be power. Then what that's doing is shifting the dynamics of the discussion. So I'm fighting in your court. Whereas when you've got the discrimination purely based on race, that's dead in the middle. That's straight down the middle. So again, it happens a lot, and through us talking, you probably see, wait, this has happened to me before. Another one, systematic racism. This is one that I argue with people all the time. I remember, shout out to my barber, the best barber in London. When I've gone to get my haircut last, we was talking about these issues because obviously they're hot topics, and and I personally don't believe systematic racism is still a thing, but that's because of my definition of systematic racism. So when we're talking about systematic racism, like if you look at what a system is, and you look at what racism is, and even if you individually, and then if you look at what systematic racism is as a term in itself, based on that definition in terms of a system that's in place which promotes or which legislates discrimination based on race. So by system, we mean policies, we mean laws. And again, feel free to look at those definitions. Then I don't believe that's still a thing in 2020. But now what I see a lot of people doing is arguing, shifting the narrative again, trying to put it in the court, saying that, oh no, but yeah, okay, there might not be any laws or policies, but they're racist people within the system, and if it's a CEO that's racist, then the whole system's racist. And I go, well, no. And again, we'll speak about this topic on a different matter. I'd like to probably even have a guest for someone that's a staunch believer that systematic racism is still a thing, and see if we can have a little informal debate on that one. But again, that's another one that gets thrown out there, where they try to shift the narrative to go from being dead down the middle to slightly left, so you're fighting at a disadvantage or you're arguing at a disadvantage. Another one, equality. So a lot of people, equality, what that means is if you go to the root word equal, it means the same as. So this is the same as this. So when we're talking about equality, that's just effectively what we're talking about. But then what people are talking about now is equity in terms of having, have I just butchered these? How have I just butchered these definitions? This is why I need to leave it to a different topic. So again, I'll go over that. I'm not going to edit it because, again, like I said, I'm trying to be honest. You're trying to get the thoughts as they happened, live in the flesh. So yeah, with regards to equality, basically you want, with regards to equal opportunities, we're talking about having the same starting point. So having equality, everyone's the same, there's no barriers. But then what a lot of people now mean by that is having the same outcome. That's what I was meant to say. So that, when you look at the definition of equality, is not the same thing. So when you guarantee outcome to be the same regardless of the work that's gone into that, again, that's a shift in narrative that's asking you to fight in their court. So again, the goal of this video, apart from butchering definitions, is to encourage healthy discussions, encourage healthy dialogue, and defining terms is a key aspect when it comes to that. I hope you found at least 2 things that I've said useful. I like to hear your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Like I said, hit that subscribe button. Wish me a happy birthday if you want to do so. If you don't, we remember those things. We'll remember those things. But it's up to you. It's up to you. If you want to, if you want to, you want to. If you don't, you don't. But we remember those things. But anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for listening. It's the Faceless Podcast. I go by the name of Shepherd. My friends call me Sheps. Call me whatever you want. As long as it's not I'll most likely respond. Hit the like, share, subscribe, notifications bell. Have a good day. Have a blessed day. I'll see you soon.